Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Genuinely Interested podcast. It's a podcast where I talk with people that I'm genuinely interested in. Interesting people, interesting topics, interesting conversations. And today on the podcast, I have Jill Robinson, who founded Animals Asia many years ago. Jill is an amazing woman who decided to take on a mission that at the time no one was really doing anything about, to be honest. Bear Bile farms is a horrendous practice in China, where in Vietnam as well, where they keep bears in tiny cages where they basically can't move for 10, 20, 30 years, and they extract bile from them with different methods. It's a horrendous practice, and Jill is really doing amazing work with Animals Asia. She is the first animal or bear sanctuary, I apologize, in China. So she's been there for about 30, 35 years, doing amazing work, helping these bears, educating the public about the plight of these bears, and really reaching out to celebrities across the world to help back Animals Asia, to help spread the word, to use social media. They're just really one of the most amazing nonprofits out there. And on top of that, they're one of the only, I believe, nonprofits that are close to achieving what they set out to do. So they're very close to ending Bear Bile farms completely, both in Vietnam and in China. And the only way they do that is through help of obviously donations and volunteers and amazing people who give money, who give time, and really care about the plight of the moon bears. So I had a great time having her on the podcast. She's someone I've wanted to talk to for a while. I really admire people who are so single-minded in their approach and so goal-oriented, and against all odds know that somehow justice will prevail and they will achieve the goal that they originally set for themselves. So it's pretty amazing. It took a long time. It's still going to take some more time, but they're making amazing strides. And if anyone can do it, definitely Jill Robinson is the person to do that. So without further ado, here is Jill Robinson.
The Genuinely Interested Podcast.
Hey, Jill, how you doing?
Hey, Roy, good. How are you?
Good, thank you. Thanks for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I've been wanting to talk to you for many years. Actually, I've had a few people on this podcast that have worked with you, and they always mention you by name, and it's they say what great work you've done, and Animals Asia is obviously your baby. It's something that you've been doing for many years. So yeah, maybe we can start there, and you could walk us through how that got started.
Oh gosh, yes, thank you. Well, it's been quite a journey, I have to say. Oh goodness, really from when I moved over to Hong Kong in 1985 with my then husband, who was an airline pilot here in Hong Kong. And gosh, I'd always loved animals. And, when I came to Hong Kong, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was thinking of going into television because I'd worked in TV back in the UK. And radio, but it was just one day that I was looking over onto the beach, and there was a guy walking his cat on the beach, and I thought, oh, there's no other interesting thing. And I went to say hello, and it turned out he was the Asia representative for the International Fund for Animal Welfare. And I became great friends with him and his wife, and I started volunteering with David Dawson. And I began working with I4 for the next 12 years. And after David had left Hong Kong, I took over his role and just thoroughly enjoyed my time. But it was actually in 1993 when I got a call from a journalist friend of mine who had just come back from a Bear Bile farm in China and just said, Jill, you have to go along and see this place. And my interest was, of course, immediately piqued. I didn't know anything about bears at all. I knew nothing about Bear Bile farming, but I wanted to go along and see what was happening. And I did. I joined a I grabbed a couple of friends and we joined a tour group of Japanese and Taiwanese tourists, went over the border to China, found the bear farm, and then we went away from where the tourists were because they were really just being shown the shop and the breeding bears. So nothing sort of really, egregiously cruel and stark. And it was when we went down into the basement and saw these bears in tiny wire cages and their terrible injuries and the trauma that they were obviously going through. And we realized we'd come face to face with what was Bear Bile farming in its true reality. And it's just never left me. And it was at that time, as I was walking around the farm, I felt something touch my shoulder and I turned around and I thought, oh my gosh, you're going to be hurt, because I'd obviously got too close to the cage. And a female bear just had her paw through the bars of the cage. And I did something which I say today was the most incredibly stupid thing I've ever done. But her paw was there and I just felt compelled to take it. And she just, instead of hurting me, she squeezed my fingers. And as I've always said since, a message went between us and I've never seen her again. But from that second, everything changed. Everything about my life changed. And I knew that I was inextricably drawn to this bear and to her message and to, I think, what became then a lifelong challenge of working to end bear bile farming in Asia.
So after you go through that horrific experience, what are your next steps? Do you go back, talk to your husband? Do you start a nonprofit or try to learn more about the topic? Kind of what are your next steps?
Yeah, that's a good question, Roy. Of course, yeah, I spoke to my husband and, it was obviously something that, we knew that it was never going to go away. And I think the first thing I wanted to do was to understand the mechanics of the use of bear bile in traditional medicine. So I started calling traditional medicine doctors in Hong Kong and meeting with them and just trying to understand this discipline of how bear bile was being used. And I think I got the biggest wake-up shock that I wanted to write bear bile off as a quack medicine. I couldn't believe that it actually worked, but I was very formally told that it does work in traditional medicine terms. It's a cold medicine to treat heat-related illnesses like high fevers and high temperatures, red and sore eyes, etc. And, from there, I realized that we couldn't disparage traditional medicine, neither did we want to. I also looked at it more extensively from a Western perspective and found actually that bear bile contains a very essential acid called ursodeoxycholic acid, or UDCA. And when I researched more into that component, I found that it really works. Again, it's something that has actually been synthesized in the West, not from bears, but chemically synthesized in a laboratory, and has been used since the 1950s to cure, again, all manner of complaints and illnesses. And in fact, even the Minnesota University in the US has been researching very, very extensively on ursodeoxycholic acid. So, those sort of wake-up calls really make you think that that actually, while a substance is being used in traditional medicine, can we replace it? And that again was the next issue, and a very pleasant surprise. Talking with the doctors that said, yes, of course, in traditional medicine terms, you can replace bear bile with 54 different herbal alternatives in different usages and components, and of course the synthetic alternative as well. So with that, armed with that information, I felt very strongly that we could make headway to work towards ending bear farming. And over the years, I formed relationships with government representatives in China, with NGOs, with people that felt as passionately as I did, and ultimately leading to the founding of Animals Asia in 1998, where this was our pioneer program to do exactly, to achieve our founding goal and end bear bile farming in China and Vietnam.
So yeah, that's crazy. I always thought it was kind of like tiger penis or rhino horn or all these things that are kind of steeped in tradition, but scientifically have zero benefits. But you're saying that there actually are benefits, but they're easily, either scientifically synthesized, or you can use plants and they would have the exact same benefits.
Exactly. And in fact, there's researchers in Hong Kong University, Dr. Feng Yubin, who has been extensively researching bear bile, and he's come out with the fact that the herb coptis is as good or better than bear bile for treating cancer cell lines. And I can well believe that as well, especially, in terms of the bile. We've rescued over 600 bears now, Roy, and to see the contaminants in the bile, from these bears is shocking, absolutely shocking. So I can only imagine that plants, would be as good as better because they don't contain the contaminant that bear bile contains.
So for people who may not know, can you explain what Bear Bile farms are and what the extraction process is?
Well, across Asia, thousands of bears are farmed for their bile, and have been since the early 1980s. It's a practice that sees different methods of bile extraction, ranging from metal catheters implanted into their gallbladders or latex catheters, or what is allowed now in China called the free drip fistula, which sees a hole being cut into the abdomen and the gallbladder brought to the front of the abdomen and adhered to the stitch to the abdomen, and where the fistula just sees bile freely dripping out. In Vietnam, the method is slightly different in that the bear is again anaesthetized, but with illegal ketamine in the country. And as the bear is unconscious, an ultrasound machine is used to detect the gallbladder. And when the farmer believes that, or the operator believes that they've found the gallbladder, they will use a 6-inch spinal needle to go into the gallbladder and take the needle out of the sheath. They will often lick it to determine that they've reached the bitter tasting bile. And when they're reassured, they'll put the needle back into the sheath and they'll pump out about 100 ml of bear bile. But, through this time, this is just the extraction process. But through this time, these bears are lying in cages for their entire life, sometimes even up to 30 years of their life. Or until they die of disease, which they very often do. And so there's all manner of problems physically and psychologically because of this practice. So they're very often engaged in bar biting, and they'll shatter their own teeth as a result of that. They'll bang their heads against the cage, so they'll injure their eyes. Their eyes are also affected by the fact of poor nutrition on the farm, a lack of vitamin E, and also because of the if they are diseased, the disease will often travel into their eyes and damage it. They have mobility problems because they can't obviously move properly. They have heart problems because of the stress as well. Gosh, they just, we call them our broken bears when we rescued them. They've really been through the most awful life on these farms. But, again, we're very grateful to the governments when we can rescue these bears. And as I say, with over 600 now, we're for sure forming together a very sort of concise inventory, if you like, of the bear bile farming practice, indeed to the moment where we've signed a memorandum of understanding with the Vietnam government to end bear bile farming once and for all by the year 2022.
That's amazing.
Well, it was certainly a celebration when we signed that MOU, I have to say, because it's something, we were the first group, of course, to start this. And in Vietnam, we've seen the climate change very, very much from government officials that were bear bile farmers, believe it or not, in the early days, and now to government officials that will stand at tourist hotspots and hand out leaflets against bear bile farming. Over these years and years and years, we've seen great change in both countries, in China and Vietnam. We've seen, a willingness to protect bears much more now in China as well. We've seen greater collaboration with the authorities in both countries. So, it's a minefield, to be honest with you, Roy, but at the same time, we're seeing great progress, and we're seeing, great sort of confidence, I think, and comfort in the fact that our programs are touching the hearts and minds of people in those countries and seeing success.
Is there a specific reason why they used moon bears as opposed to other bears?
Just because they're the most, sort of populated bears in those countries. to be honest. So, but also, when one looks at the content of the UDCA in their bile, it does seem that they have more of this essential acid than other bear species as well. So that's quite interesting. And it's interesting too how, traditional medicine practitioners thousands of years ago, were using this in very small amounts for very specific disease. But even then, all those years ago, that they knew that bear bile worked. So again, I think it's another reason why we can't always criticize the discipline of traditional medicine at all. And, in Vietnam especially, we work with a very large organization, traditional medicine organization there of some 70,000 members who have also agreed to give up the use and prescription of bear bile by the end of this year as well, believing again that there are many components that can take its place. So it's been an interesting journey. Again, as I said at the beginning, it's taught us a lot. And I think in cases such as rhino horn, it would be difficult to just, to say that those sort of products work. But with bear bile, we absolutely, have to say that they do. We have to give that at least respect to traditional medicine, but at least also they give the respect back to the animals now and say that, again, it can easily and cheaply be replaced by herbs and synthetics.
In your professional opinion, what do you think is the best way to drive down demand? Is it through education, regulation, or maybe a combination of both?
There's a lot going on now, as I said, especially in China, where we are ending it by the year 2022. So it's seen a lot of work with the governments, with foreign embassies there, of course, public education programs, working with the traditional medicine doctors. We have, regular clinics where the doctors come along for local communities and talk about the use of bear bile and then bring along the herbal alternatives that the local community can try. And if they like it, which they always do, because we're giving out free samples and they can see for themselves that the alternatives work. So then they're more inclined to move away from the bear bile, of course. We do a lot of work in schools. We have, painting competitions. We have competitions where the kids can grow the herbal alternatives in the gardens of their schools. We have celebrities helping us across the country. It's a really big holistic approach to ending bear bile farming in Vietnam. And as I say, it's becoming now to the point where we're very, very excited that, it's finally done. It's just done there.
How difficult was it to get permissions to start the sanctuary? I know you have the only animal sanctuary, definitely the only bear sanctuary in the whole of China. So how difficult was that? Did you have to go into discussions with the government? Maybe take us through the process of how difficult it was to get that started.
Yeah, another very long journey, and just creating the trust with the Chinese authorities, who have been very supportive of the sanctuary being established. So forming an alliance, a collaboration, if you like, with the forestry department there in the country, and also sort of embarking on other programs, Roy, as well, to protect bears in the wild, obviously with human conflict mitigation, to human bear conflict mitigation there as well, where obviously the human habitat is growing into bear habitat. You're seeing more and more conflict there. So it's sort of trying to work with the local field biologists and understanding the extent of the problem. So we're supplying things like uniforms and camera traps to the biologists so that they can go out and do their research in the field. And once that they've got the research to hand and they can, see from the camera traps where the bears are coming in and what the problems are, then to work on problems, how to mitigate those problems as well with them. So, it's trying to, again, keep the community as safe as well as the bears. In China and indeed in Vietnam. And you're right about the demand. This obviously, this isn't the end of the program, just ending bear farming, because there's still obviously going to be a certain amount of demand. So it just means that the government and ourselves and other NGOs are certainly going to have to go out in programs of awareness now in the field and into the communities to try to encourage a greater respect and support of living harmoniously with the bears in the wild.
With the prevalence and uptick in zoonotic diseases and more media attention, more government attention being put on it, Do you see a reduction or some implementation by the Chinese government to reduce the wet markets and the wildlife trade and Bear Bile farms, of course?
It's an interesting question. There already has been great steps by the Chinese government to close down the wild animal markets of the country. And I think we need to make the distinction between live animal markets and wet markets. Wet markets are being used now all the time, and that's the wrong term. We're all very familiar, even here in Hong Kong, with wet markets. They're literally just a fresh produce market and very different from live and wild animal markets. But in terms of the latter, the Chinese government has already closed them down and prohibited the use, the consumption of wild animals. But obviously there are areas where wild animals are still allowed to be utilised, and that's in the areas of scientific research, in display, and in medicine as well. So, bear bile farming is still a legal practice in China, and hopefully as we go on, with the program, especially in Vietnam, to end it there, we hope that the way that this works is to do this without any embarrassment, without any looking back, making the government and the farmers and the country itself, as sort of proactive in ending the trade, so that there's not a blame game. No one likes being told what to do. And so, we want to do this right so that everybody comes out winning, not least the bears.
Once you get the call from a farmer and they tell you, hey, come pick up this bear, for whatever reason they don't want it there anymore, what's the process of getting that bear from how you say, broken bear to a healthy, happy bear that can roam around the grounds of the rescue center? I'm sure there's a lengthy process where they have to go through a lot of rehabilitation. Maybe take us through that process. And I guess, have you ever been able to release a bear into the wild?
We've released one bear. We were very, very excited to have been brought on board by the Chinese government to help them with the bear just down the road from where our sanctuary is in Sichuan province, a bear that had been caught in the wild in a leg hold trap. And we drove up and found this, skinny bear that had obviously been caught for several days. Her mum was nowhere near her. She was probably a yearling by then. And we managed to anaesthetize her, obviously, and bring her back to our sanctuary, where our vet team had no alternative but to amputate the now diseased paw. But we kept her very wild at the sanctuary. Obviously, when we rescue the bears, normally, we're obviously having to try and encourage their trust in humans because they're going to be with us for life. But with Rainbow, we tried to retain her wildness, so she couldn't always see who was feeding her. We just threw the food in. She wasn't able to see human presence as she was healing. And again, we kept her wildness. We a few weeks later, after the surgery, we took her back up into the mountainside where the government had already swept the area for any other traps there. So we released her in a similar area where we'd found her. And lo and behold, we actually, her collar had failed. The GPS collar had failed. So we were very sad about that. We thought we'd never see or hear from her again. And yet it was a year later that the government sent us a film from a camera trap with a three-legged bear, obviously Rainbow, hopping around in the countryside, in the forest. It was wonderful. It was really wonderful. So, it obviously proves it can be done in China. And we obviously love programs like that with the government because it was a fantastic proof of collaboration, But yeah, in terms of the rescue, every single one is different. We get the call to go out and rescue these bears. Either the trucks, as very often in China, the trucks will come to our gate still with the bears in their original cages, or more the case in Vietnam, we'll get asked to go to a bear farm to bring the bears back from that Bear Bile farm. We call these bears our Kinder Surprise bears. You just never know. Those chocolate surprise things that you get with the toys inside. You never know what the toys are.
I love those at the
Right. Well, that's our Kinder Surprise bears. We never know what we're going to see when we turn up at the farms. You know, our amazing team, they are superb. And you know, you walk onto the farm, you have to try to trust what the farmer is saying, how long they've had the bears, when they last extracted the bears, when they last gave the anesthetic, you know, because that obviously affects our decision on whether we need to anesthetize the bear or not to get them out of the cage. You know, the method of bile extraction, what the bears like to eat, you know, where they came from, you know, just the whole, and, you know, you don't always get the truth, I have to say, from the farmers. So we're almost like detectives as well, you know, just observing those bears in the early minutes that we arrive on the farm and just deciding if it's safe to remove them from the cage while they're conscious, you know, backing up our recovery cages, our transport cages next to the cage where they are and letting them step in so that we can take them back for a proper health check back at base, or whether we need to anaesthetize them on site at the farm and bring them back then. And of course, once we get them back to the sanctuaries, well, that's a whole new storybook opening up in front of our eyes, because once we've got them safely, you know, in the quarantine area, we're just observing them, unless they're very, very sick, of course, and need, you know, urgent surgical intervention. We're just basically observing them for a few days just to see if they're eating okay, what their preferences are, what their injuries are, if any, you know, what we think we can do to help, and just assessing them every single day. And our teams are amazing at that in both countries. And then finally to the stage of obviously getting them on the health check table for a full health check, you know, working up on the bloods, just looking at every single component of their health while they're on the surgery table, doing ultrasound, heart checks, just absolutely dentals. All the bears, basically nearly all the bears will need dentals as well, as I said earlier, because they've broken their teeth on the bars. So there's just a ton of things. Many of them have the mobility problems that need medication for life as well, or heart problems, etc., etc. Some of them will have gallbladder trauma. Some of them will have, you know, cancers as well, and that we have to deal with. So, you know, it's an amazing thing, I have to say. And you know, our job is to keep them for as long as we can and keep them happy and healthy as we can for years, if not decades, hopefully.
And I mean, what is the criteria that the farmers call you? I mean, is it because they can't extract any more bile from them? Are they just too close to dying? Are they just in really bad shape? I mean, at what point do some of these farmers give you a call and say, "Hey, come pick up this bear"?
It's a combination of things. And again, in Vietnam, you know, because bear farming is illegal, you know, the farmers are ever since 2005, when they were allowed to microchip their bears and keep them ostensibly as pets. And of course, they don't keep them as pets at all, but they're still extracting their bile. But, you know, if they're exposed for extracting, you know, the government will then come to us to ask us to, you know, help confiscate those bears. Some of the farmers do indeed want to give them up as well. And they, you know, they're the people that we really want to hold up now. You know, some of your listeners might be shocked to hear us say as heroes, but you know, this is the thing that we want to do. We want to show these farmers as being at least kind enough to realize that, you know, what their past practices have not been kind to the bears. And this is Animals Asia showing our kindness in action to rescue them and to show to the farmers, again, our gratitude for them giving these bears up. So there are very, very different scenarios, you know, every single time to these farmers giving up their bears. Sometimes you get their children convincing them to give them up as well because of the work that we've done in the schools. You know, that often happens as well. We work in key, you know, bear farming hotspots right in the middle of these places where kids are going to schools whose parents are indeed bear bile farmers. So, you know, every story is different. But it's again, it's a wonderful thing when we are able to go out there and bring these bears home, because, you know, again, going back to, you know, after the health check, after any surgery that they've needed, after removing these bears' pain is the biggest, you know, component here, I think. And once that is removed, you suddenly see them becoming bears again. You know, they get their curiosity back, they get their sense of mischief back, they get to trust people again. And then we can start slowly integrating them, in enclosures. Our enclosures are absolutely beautiful, with anything up to 24 bears in each enclosure in Vietnam. And just to see these groups of bears together, I mean, bears are not naturally sociable in the wild either. So to see them, as we call with the boys, in bear bundles of play. They're giddy, absolutely giddy with excitement. They turn somersaults on their own because they can. They destroy everything that they can, all the enclosure furniture, because they can. Our team has to work very, very hard to give them a comprehensive enrichment program to allow them to behave like bears, and just watch out that they're not destroying the trees, that, it's just a fantastic thing, and it makes us very privileged to be working with them.
Yeah, I mean, there's a beautiful video where you see, I don't remember the name of the bear, but there's this one bear, never seen water in his, or hers 10, 15, 20 years. And all of a sudden this bear just in the water. You can just playing, just so happy. And it's, it almost brings a tear to your eye, knowing that this bear has been in the cage for 99% of his life, just without the ability to move. And now when he's in water, you just see them thrive all of a sudden.
Totally. That was a bear called Tuffy, and that video went viral. I mean, it was the most joyous thing, as you say, to watch. But even the simple things, when you give them food that they've never had before, they'll use their paws like a dinner plate. So they'll have it sort of fur side up, not pad side up, and they'll just put the food on the pad, and they'll cautiously sniff it or nibble at it or play with the other, with the claws of their other paw. It's just wonderful to see their eyes opening up to a whole new world that they've never experienced before. And as I say, their sense of play with the other bears, their sense of mischief and fun. They'll go running up to another bear who's happily eating in the grass and bite their bum and run away, and you can see that. You can almost hear them laughing. They have an absolute beautiful sense of mischief about them as well. They're very dog-like as well, and and the swimming, as you say, you put even tiny little paddling pools into the enclosure, apart from the lovely big swimming pools that they have, and they have such fun, like children in a paddling pool. Just splashing and splashing, blowing bubbles, and it's just wonderful to see them.
Yeah, I had earlier. You mentioned that some of the kids of these quote unquote farmers are telling them to either release the bears, or they're more understanding of the situation maybe than their parents. And I had Paul Hilton, who on a few episodes ago, and he was saying a similar thing about the shark fins. He was saying that obviously, China is the biggest consumer of shark fin soup, but it's almost entirely the older generation, and the younger generation, people in their 20s, millennials, they don't really consume that as much. Is that true for, I think, the majority of these type of quote unquote foods or herbal or all these traditional medicines that they use? Is it more the older generation?
Yes, it is. Well, look, in terms of the medicine, maybe not always. I think traditional medicine in both China and Vietnam, is still a very popular discipline. And something, as I said, that we can't disparage, And I think as well, there was a time just a few years ago in Vietnam where younger generation were using Bear Bile because the rumor went round that it was good as a hangover cure. So that thing is obviously deeply disturbing, and that's why it's so important for the education, programs to be kicking in. But, again, I think in terms of animal welfare and conservation, absolutely, you're right. This is where the younger generation are really coming into their own. We've never seen an explosion of, groups now in China and in Vietnam, compared to what there were in the past. I always say that, when I started in China in the 80s, there was one animal welfare group, and now there's over 200 animal welfare groups. And, I defy anyone to say that China, doesn't care about animals. I think people are very willing to write off a whole country, and say, oh, they like anything to eat with four legs except a table, or anything that anything that flies except an airplane is good to eat.
I haven't heard that one. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old saying. It's a very old saying in China, actually, and spoken about Guangzhou, Guangdong province in the south. But it's not true anymore. You know, there are very, very passionate people. And what I love about the groups, the animal welfare groups in China especially, is that they work so collaboratively with the governments. They are so intelligent. They are very science-based as well. And you know, it's everything relies on paper in China, and so you really have to sort of go to the nth degree to prove something is fact, which is great because it means that things like the Doctor Dog program that I started many, many years ago in 1991, where you see dogs going to hospitals and disabled centres, you know, as a form of animal therapy. Now, for people like you in the West, that's not new. You know, that everybody knows that. We see it in the Lancet, the British Medical Journal, American papers that, you know, being in close association with dogs is good for our physical and psychological health. It's proven, it's done. But of course, we had to go a long way to do the same in China. But once we did, you know, you get people on board that, you know, that really then take this dream, take this idea and push it out there in the community. And we've now got these dogs going into hospitals, disabled centres, home for the blind and the deaf and the elderly. We've got dogs going into schools to help children enhance their reading abilities as well. We've got teachers on board and, you know, universities joining with us. It's a fantastic time now, to, you know, to be working in China, especially, I think, you know, in terms of having these dogs there.
I mean, you're in the heart of it, but I mean, to be honest, it's hard, man. A lot of times you'll see pictures, you'll see videos of you know, dogs being tortured, of the the bears in these little cages being, you know, stuck with needles for 20 years, and the shark fins and the pangolins and the wet markets, or you know, the wild trade markets. It's hard when you see those images. You know, people from the West who were so connected to our dogs. I mean, my dog is, it's like a child to me. You know, I have a bond with it. I'm very connected with it. And I think a lot of times people from the West, they see those images and they get a certain idea about what Asia in general and China specific, you know, the type of relationship that they have with animals.
Yeah, but you know, again, it's not an exclusive club, cruelty in China, you know, or Vietnam. It happens everywhere, and you know, where I come, you know, the UK, obviously horrible practices such as badger baiting and fox hunting, you know, and obviously the slaughterhouse issues now. No wonder the slaughterhouses are, you know, and it's being brought into law, I think, in some areas in the States, not to allow cameras into slaughterhouses for very
Yeah,
good reason, because of
I get close.
all awful practices going on. So, you know, we're not contained in these countries from animal cruelty whatsoever.
Yeah. Do some of
Yeah,
the
it's
dogs that,
sorry, go on.
sorry? No, I was
Oh,
just going to
sorry.
ask some of the dogs that you guys, because I know you rescued dogs as well. Do you try to, you know, find them homes in China, or do some of them get sent to Europe and to the US?
No, we're not active in dog rescue, Roy, at all. We've rescued a few dogs. We brought back to our sanctuary in China as our ambassadors. But there are of course other groups that are doing the dog rescue. Our program is in China is more holistic than that. You know, very, very heavily based on the public education programs. So we have conferences every year, for example, with, you know, Chinese government officials and the leaders of the non-government groups, hundreds of people in the same room talking about the issues to hand and you know, how we can solve them. You know, working with the local NGOs who have sanctuaries, who have shelters, dog and cat shelters. We help them to upgrade their shelters, you know, upgrade their biosecurity protocols, help them out of, I think, a state of mind where they're just collectors and just rescuers, in terms of helping them with their public education programs and you know, helping them with fundraising and helping them with their sort of psychological state as well, you know, in terms of what they see every day and how they deal with that. Um, gosh, working, of course, with the governments on rabies control, for example, as well, and showing that the current methods to try to deal with a rabies outbreak where they're culling the dogs in one area isn't the right way to deal with rabies, and it's down to proper dog management control. Just a whole raft of programs that, videos that we send out across the country that shows how people can connect better with dogs and cats in society too. Kids that have never known dogs, how to recognize their body language, how to recognize how to approach dogs safely. Gosh, as I said before, teaching children how to read properly through having doctor dogs as their teachers, believe it or not, and the reading materials that the kids are reading to the dogs, being all about the environment and the world around them and animal welfare, etc., etc. So lots and lots of different projects that bring people closer to dogs, harmonize people in the community with dogs and make them more sympathetic towards them, as a whole.
So your organization, it's a nonprofit. So I'm assuming all the income you have is based on donations. Are you having any issues now with these COVID times? I know people are a little bit everyone's stressed out, people losing their jobs. So has that affected you guys in any way?
Yes, it has. Of course, I don't. With among many NGOs, we've been affected. We've had to rein in programs. We've had to do cost cuts. We've got contingencies, for more contingencies for if this gets worse. At the beginning, we had huge problems, especially in China, trying to source food and medication for the bears and for our teams as well, of course. That settled down a little bit. I mean, what we could get with the prices were through the roof as well. So we're in a little bit better place now in China. But of course, as I said, as an organization, we've had to really cut back costs, and, we're extremely worried. I can't tell you, it's because, again, we've got mouths to feed. We're not just an NGO that's raising money for education programs. Those of course can be stalled. But we have very, very hungry and very greedy mouths to feed in terms of the bears. So that's a problem for us, and will be until this virus has, the consequences of the virus have passed.
Yeah. How much has social media and celebrity backing? There's people like Ricky Gervais and a few others that I've seen promote you guys. How much has that helped push the message out?
Yeah. Wonderfully, of course, always does. It's fantastic to see them. We're very, very, very blessed with our ambassadors. In the US, we have the wonderful Ali McGraw, remember from Love Story. We have Leslie Nichol, who stars as Mrs. Patmore in Downton Abbey, together with Peter Egan, who's our UK ambassador as well. We have the lovely Olivia Newton-John, who lives in the US as well, of course. Matt Sorum from Guns N' Roses. We have quite a diverse selection.
Oh, wow.
Of celebrity help, who do, of course, to have and these are the real deal as well. We do obviously have to vet our celebrities very seriously too, just to ensure that they are good with animal welfare, and of course they are as well. Yeah, they are. And they've become great friends as well. I get an enormous kick of being friends with our celebrities as well. I have to say, I'm not sure that Leslie will listen, but Leslie Nichol is just amazing. I love just, we all do. We all love Leslie, connecting with her. And Ali McGraw, she's funny as hell as well. So it's, these are good people that really get it and work their socks off to help us as well. So a big, huge thank you to our celebrities.
Well, you're going to have the link to this episode, so you can send them, and I'm sure they'll appreciate it.
Yeah, totally.
So, I mean, a little bit of a turn, but I mean, like I said, when you look along the social media landscape and then you look into animal rights and stuff, sometimes it's amazing how unbelievably cruel humans can be and what we inflict on humans. But then other times it's unbelievably amazing when you see how many amazing people there are that radiate good energy and, attract people to them. The people like yourself, people like Jane Goodall, Captain Paul Watson, Lincoln O'Barry, all these other people that start movements and bring forth some sort of a revelation that people, or a story that people just had no idea about before, and they start a movement and bring people, to stop whatever the injustice is. What in your opinion is that thing that makes people like yourself and others do this and keep at it and not stop even 10, 15, 20 years after, not necessarily stopping the thing that they wanted, but just incrementally stopping it?
Mm. I mean, obviously it's passion at the core, but I think it's a defining moment very often, and as I say, it was that moment that the bear squeezed my hand and it just set me on the trajectory. And I think once you sort of dive into something like this, there's no way that you can leave it. It just becomes so much more than a job. It's just simply your way of life. And you become buoyed so much by the successes that you see as well, and I think, again, just 30 years, 35 years, gosh, now here in this neck of the woods, you can see great change. Roy, I wouldn't be wasting your time. I wouldn't be wasting our supporters' time. And I certainly wouldn't be wasting our staff time if we weren't seeing the progress that we're seeing. But we are, and we can take enormous confidence, I think, that our programs are very surely working. And again, with the privilege it is to work with the animals themselves as well, just to see the light come on in their eyes after they've been, so deeply affected and hurt as they have in the past, and now to see their whole characters change, it's wonderful. It just gives you such a sense of fulfillment and pride, and it just embarks, I think, on our new tagline, which is kindness in action. And I think in this day and age, this whole world needs a lot more kindness. And I think that's one of our values now, is to try to spread that. I think everybody is being more kind. Everyone that's on lockdown is seeing the value of checking out your neighbours, making sure your family are okay, even if you can't be near them. And that's what we're trying now to encourage, in that deeper connection with the animal world. And again, with coronavirus, this has helped us now, because things have to change. We cannot carry on the way we are, and we have to change. And so that keeps us going, I think, to answer your question. We are seeing that change. We are seeing that kindness in action, and we have to encourage more of it.
Yeah. And we need more people like you, and people who dedicate their lives to a cause. But do some of the images that you've seen over the years, do those stay with you, or is that something that you know how to compartmentalize and stuff down or talk through, or whatever it is that you do to to live with it?
It's all of us, Roy. It's not just myself. I worry about our younger vet nurses, for example, you know what I mean? And our bear carers, the sort of stuff that they see as well. It's no different, and of course I've been going to these markets, as I said, for over 30 years now, and you never get over it, I think. But I think, we encourage a lot of psychological help as well. We encourage a lot of conversations when you come back from seeing these places, a lot of discussions to help people. If people need more of a backup, we offer that as well, and myself personally, I think I'm quite good at compartmentalizing.
I have the same problem with that. Same problem.
I have a lot of deep, dark boxes, I think, in my head that might open one day. But you know what, at the end of the day, as well, again, we are so blessed to have the consequences of this good work with these bears tumbling out of their dens every morning, and seeing the sheer joy of life that they have. But I think that heals our soul as well. It heals our hearts and our minds too. So I'm sure we always say they rescue us as much as we rescue them.
Yeah, that's amazing. But sometimes when I was watching the footage on YouTube and looking at the videos of some of the bears and the rehabilitation, and some of them, I don't know. I don't know if it's because they're moon bears and they're they're obviously different than what we have here in the U.S., the black bears, the grizzly bears, etc. But they almost look, I don't know, for lack of a better word, almost deformed. I don't know if it's because they've been in these cages and their growth has been stunted and they just weren't able to fully mature as possible, but they almost look different than what I'm assuming a moon bear in the wild would look like.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, many of them are. We have some, fantastic bears that have not been farmed for long or not kept in cages. And you can very much, as you say, see the difference between them and the bears that have been farmed. We've got a whole house in Vietnam called the Little Toy Bear House, which is full of what we call our munchkin bears. they're little bears like hamsters or guinea pigs that run around. Their legs are so much shorter, haven't been able to, provide the space to grow when they've been in these cages, and their whole body conformation is so badly out, so badly deformed, but they've turned into delightful little munchkins, as I say, and it's just so nice to be able to turn that into a description of love, if you like, and to just bring people in on this journey of ours as well, to understand their background, but gosh, how they recover and how such, what a stoic species they are, the propensity they have to recover from all of this. They're just wonderful animals to work with.
Yeah, I know. There's a movement in many countries, and they've made basically animal circuses illegal, which is it's one of those industries I just find so cruel and demeaning. To put these highly intelligent animals in skirts and make them walk on a ball or jump through a hoop of fire or whatever the stupid thing that they make them do. There's certain videos where I just watch and I get infuriated. It just is so infuriating. But yeah, like I said, I know there's a lot of countries that they've made it completely illegal. Are you seeing that happen in Asia generally and in China specifically?
Oh, yeah. Very much. This is our captive animal welfare program that's run by our animal welfare director, Dave Neal. It's fantastic, Roy. And as you say, animal performance is the most demeaning thing and such a crime to these animals in terms of exploiting them in every sense of the word. We've got a program called Not Born to Perform. And, this is something that we're seeing again. We've got a long, long way to go, clearly, but Dave and his team have done such amazing work in China, in Vietnam, to stop animal performances and to really sort of drive this education program through the community, to asking people not to visit circuses that exhibit pitiful animals, as you say, dressed in skirts and doing performances as well. So there is a long way, but certainly the schools and university programs, that's what makes them so critical, so important today. And, when you see university students, creating the most amazing artistry that they do. We ask for posters to be created, and oh my goodness, the imagination that goes into those. And then those same posters are displayed, free of charge in things like railway stations and bus stations and, in public areas, exhibitions and things as well. So step by step, you're not going to stop these things overnight, as you don't obviously anywhere else, in the USA, for example, but you start sowing that seed, and we're certainly seeing that grow now in China and Vietnam.
And on that note, did you see the movie the series Tiger King?
Do I saw the first episode, and I'll be completely honest with you. I sat and looked at it with disbelief, absolute disbelief. And I thought, I don't think I can waste another 6 hours of my life watching this. I did. I tell you honestly, I felt ashamed as a human being watching that. And I just thought, I can't, we do enough in China and Vietnam, to try to turn things like that around. And I lost the will to live.
Yeah. I watched the whole thing. And after watching it, so basically what happened is the woman that runs the cat sanctuary, according to her, she says that the director, when he approached her, he said this would kind of be the Blackfish for tigers, right? It would expose the backyard breeding, all these little places where they keep tigers in these tiny cages, and it was supposed to be a movement just like Blackfish was. Again, according to what's her name, Carol Baskin. But that obviously never happened, and they made this guy, Joe Exotic, to be a cultural phenomenon. And I just never understood why they didn't focus on the fact that these poor cats are just treated horrifically and killed, and they didn't put the attention. They put the attention on the freak, which is, again, this is the U.S. They love to do that because it's sensationalism. It's it becomes a meme. It's very internet worthy, especially in this viral day and age where everything goes viral. But I just felt it was just such a missed opportunity for such a show, such a huge show, to show the plight of these poor cats in these backyard cages. And it was just, again, such a missed opportunity, in my opinion.
Right. I mean, the first episode again, it just made me so devastated and ashamed again as a human, to just see the animals morbidly obese for a start. They're morbidly obese, and it was from that second on, I thought, gosh, another friend of mine saw it, the whole thing, but she said she also felt ashamed at the end of it, to the extent that she said she would dedicate those 7 hours into fundraising and conservation,
Oh, wow.
just so that they wouldn't be wasted. So, which I thought,
Well,
yeah,
that's a good idea. I wish more people would do that. It's America is it's a funny place. It is a funny place. I don't know how to explain it. It's got a lot of amazing, magnificent people, some of the smartest in the world, but then also some of the, I don't want to say some of the dumbest, but definitely Joe Exotic is a representation of that. So we'll leave that. So I guess I'll leave on the last question. Just as far as your staff and volunteers, what's the size of the place and the size of your staff? How many volunteers do you have? I mean, it must be 24/7, and these must be super dedicated people to work under those conditions.
It is. I mean, we've got the 2 sanctuaries, which I should say as well, we're very, very proud to have been awarded the Global Federation of Animal Sanctuaries Award. You have to jump through a lot of hoops to get that award in both China and Vietnam. So, and we're the only group to have them in China. So for bears in Vietnam as well. So we're extremely proud of that. And that's become, as a result of years and years. When we first began, goodness, we were learning from ground zero. There's no question about that. But over the years, we've certainly learned our lessons a lot. And I'm surprised. We've got over 300 staff now, which you have to be looking after these magnificent animals. We do have a volunteer program. People can go on to our website and have a look at that if they're interested in joining a volunteer program. We do ask for experience in animal management, but if you do have that, hop on and have a look. And please also help us, to work towards that conclusion. I don't think many NGOs can say that they're going to reach the goal for which they were founded. And we've certainly done that with Vietnam and ending bear farming. So, it gives us enormous courage now to continue, to other aspects. And and when you say about in America, we have got a fantastic ground base of support there, wonderful, wonderful American supporters. So I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to Paula and our team in our office there in LA, and to all our supporters across the country. You've kept us going, you keep us keeping on. So thank you.
Yeah, I hope they hear it. And like you said, go to Animals Asia, go to all their social media. If you can donate, if you can, maybe support in other ways, share their message, share their stories. Just whatever we can, because I actually never thought of it that way. But yeah, there's not a lot of NGOs out there that are close to completing the mission that they started. And that's amazing that you guys are close to that. So thank you so much for doing what you do. That's really amazing.
Thank you, Roy. Thank you for the opportunity to chat with you today. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, same here. Hopefully we can do it in the future again. So again, thank you so much for everything that you've done over the years. And thank you for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Bless you. Keep safe. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.